The cold wind cut through the pines as Raymond McAllister rumbled down the private road in his beat-up Ford pickup. Mud flaked from the undercarriage as he crested the hill and saw the place come into view. Sterling Drake's mansion. It was more a fortress than a home, perched like a glass and stone beast overlooking Lake Wentworth, with security cameras staring down from every angle. The man had money, that was obvious, but no taste Raymond could understand. Still, a job was a job. The gold-plated valve in the master bathroom's rainfall shower had blown out again, third time this month. Raymond had warned them that kind of hardware wasn't built for the water pressure coming off their private well, but nobody wanted to hear advice from a farmer in Carhartt overalls. Raymond parked in the side lot, where his truck looked hilariously out of place next to luxury SUVs and one gleaming black Escalade with tinted windows. He grabbed his battered toolbox from the bed, adjusted his flannel collar, and headed for the service entrance. Inside, the mansion was just as Raymond remembered: marble floors, a grand staircase, and that chilly showroom feel that made it hard to believe anyone actually lived there. A housekeeper led him upstairs with barely a word, heels clicking on the polished floor. The master bath was ridiculous. Gold-trimmed everything, from the faucets to the towel bars. The offending valve lay in pieces near the drain, glinting like treasure. Raymond sighed and got to work without fanfare. As he crouched beneath the fixture, twisting the valve stem with gentle care, he heard voices echoing from the next room. 3 weeks in dry dock and they still can't fix the damn thing? A deep voice snapped, "What are we spending all this money on if our submarines can't even handle their own water systems?" Another voice, calm and professional, responded, "It's not that simple, Mr. Drake. The Defender's purification system is integrated with multiple subsystems. We've replaced every component, twice. The contamination keeps returning." Raymond blinked at the mention of the Defender. That was a Virginia-class submarine, if he remembered right. He wiped his hands on a rag, his curiosity piqued. A moment later, the bathroom door opened, and Sterling Drake himself appeared, wearing a navy sport coat and a smirk. "Still crawling under things, McAllister?" he said, his tone dry. Raymond stood, keeping his voice even. "Water pressure's still too high for these fixtures, Mr. Drake. I've installed a new regulator and flushed the line. Should hold this time." Drake snorted. Simple solutions from a simple man. Raymond didn't rise to the bait. "Is there anything else you'd like me to look at?" Drake motioned toward the living room. "Actually, yes. Come join us for a minute. We're discussing something you might find amusing." Raymond followed him reluctantly, wiping his hands on his jeans. The living room was absurdly large, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. 3 men stood near the fireplace, all in Navy dress uniforms. Raymond recognized the older one immediately, Admiral Quentin Hale, commander of the Naval Submarine Base in Portsmouth. "This is Raymond McAllister," Drake announced, as if presenting a curiosity. "He fixed my shower again, farmer by trade, plumber when it suits him." Raymond nodded politely. "Admiral." Hale gave a curt nod in return. "Mr. McAllister." "The Defender's still stuck in port?" Drake asked, pouring himself a scotch. He didn't offer Raymond one. $3 billion, state-of-the-art everything, and yet it can't handle basic plumbing? A younger officer frowned. "With respect, sir, the contamination is complex. We've been chasing anomalies across multiple systems." Drake turned to Raymond with a grin. "What do you think, Mr. McAllister? You deal with water problems every day. Got a homespun solution for the U.S. Navy?" Raymond hesitated, glancing at the Admiral. He wasn't sure if speaking would help or hurt, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. "Well, if contamination keeps coming back even after part replacements, it could be a pressure reversal," he said quietly. "Back pressure can force contaminants through weak points, especially in shared enclosures." Silence fell. All eyes turned to him. "What did you say?" Admiral Hale asked. Raymond shifted, uncomfortable. "Just thinking aloud. I don't know your setup, but when components keep failing across systems, the pressure dynamics are usually out of balance. It creates cross-contamination." Drake laughed. "Did you hear that? My plumber thinks he can solve what your engineers haven't figured out in weeks." Hale's expression was unreadable. "Have you worked on industrial systems before?" "Used to," Raymond said. "Long time ago. I was a mechanical systems specialist for the Navy back in the 90s, before I came home to run the farm. Drake's eyes lit up. This just keeps getting better. All right, here's a thought. Why not let the farmer take a crack at it? Mr. Drake, Hale began. I'll make it interesting, Drake interrupted. $100,000 says no farmer, no plumber, can solve the defender's problem. If he fails, I'll donate it to the Navy Relief Society. If, by some miracle, he succeeds, well, he names his prize. Raymond held up a hand. This isn't a game, Mr. Drake. I didn't come here looking to make a bet. Then don't take it, Drake said with a smirk. But if you do, maybe people will start seeing you as something more than a guy who fixes leaky pipes. Raymond thought of Sam, working long hours just to make ends meet. Of Brooke, pulling double shifts to support underfunded research. Of the neighbors in town, too proud to admit they couldn't afford trade school for their kids. If I take this, he said slowly, and I succeed, I don't want your money. Drake raised an eyebrow. Then what? A fully funded apprenticeship program for rural youth who want to learn a trade but can't afford the tuition. Your name on it, of course. The room went quiet again. Admiral Hale looked intrigued. The officers exchanged glances. Drake was already smiling. Well, damn. That's the first interesting thing I've heard all week. He extended his hand. You're on, Mr. McAllister. Raymond didn't move to shake it. He just nodded once, his voice quiet but steady. Then I'll need to see the submarine. The drive back from Sterling Drake's estate was a quiet one. The old Ford pickup creaked as it bumped along the narrow, frost-heaved backroads of rural New Hampshire. Pine trees blurred past the windows, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snow-dusted fields. Inside the cab, Raymond McAllister gripped the wheel tighter than he needed to, his jaw clenched and thoughts spiraling. The Defender, a Virginia-class submarine, a machine built for silence, pressure, and precision. A system so complex that a team of top-tier Navy engineers had already spent weeks trying to fix it. And now he, a farmer with calloused hands and a history he didn't often talk about, was being asked to step into their world again. He hadn't set foot on a naval vessel in over 20 years, and there was a reason for that. As he pulled onto the gravel drive leading to his modest farmhouse, he could already see the soft glow of the porch light and the silhouette of someone stacking wood along the side of the barn. Sam, always pitching in, always moving. The kid was rough around the edges, but dependable, loyal, like a younger version of himself before life got heavy. Raymond parked and sat for a moment before getting out. The truck engine ticked as it cooled, and the cold air bit at his face as he stepped into the snow. "Everything go okay at Drake's?" Sam called out, wiping his hands on a rag as he walked over. "More or less," Raymond replied. "Valves holding for now." Sam gave a skeptical grunt. "That guy calls you every 3 weeks like clockwork, then acts like you're the problem." Raymond managed a faint smile, but it faded quickly. He didn't mention the Navy. Not yet. He needed a minute. Inside the house, the warmth hit him immediately. Wood stove blazing, kettle hissing faintly in the kitchen. The scent of pine and old books hung in the air. He dropped his toolbox by the door and took off his boots. Every movement weighted with something he wasn't ready to name. Brooke was in the kitchen, hair pulled back, still in her lab coat. She looked up from her laptop as he entered, eyes narrowing as she read his face. "What happened?" she asked. Raymond didn't answer right away. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "You remember the USS Defender?" he said finally. Brooke blinked. "That's the one docked in Portsmouth, right? Purification system failures?" "They're stuck. 3 weeks and no one's figured it out. Navy brass were at Drake's. I overheard them talking." She arched an eyebrow. "And you said something, didn't you?" Raymond sighed. "Just a guess. Back pressure, cross-contamination, the usual suspects." Brooke leaned forward. "And?" Drake turned it into a spectacle, made a bet, said no farmer could fix what Navy engineers couldn't. Offered $100,000. I said I didn't want the money, just asked that he fund an apprenticeship program instead. Brooke's expression shifted from amused to serious. And now they're expecting you to walk onto a nuclear submarine and do what no one else could? Raymond gave a half shrug. That's the idea. For a long moment, Brooke was silent. Then she crossed the room and sat beside him, folding her hands. Dad, I know what you're thinking, that you're too old, too far removed, that someone else should handle this. But you've spent your life understanding how systems breathe, how pressure moves, how failure starts at the seams. That knowledge doesn't go away. It's part of you. Raymond looked down into his mug, his voice low. I left that world behind for a reason. Brooke's face softened. I know, but maybe, just maybe, this isn't about going back. Maybe it's about finishing something. The words hung there between them. In the quiet, a memory stirred, sharp and unexpected. It was autumn, years ago. Leaves burning gold in the orchard behind the farmhouse. His wife, Ellen, laughing as she tried to fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen, insisting she didn't need his help. She always believed he could do more with his hands than he ever gave himself credit for. He had been working on a classified propulsion cooling project for the Navy at the time, away more than he was home. The night the accident happened, he'd been in D.C., briefing a committee that barely remembered his name. A drunk driver on Route 202, a second-hand call, a funeral he barely remembered. Brooke only 12. Everything fell apart after that. He left the Navy, buried his clearance, his credentials, and the blueprints that once defined him, came home, and never left again. Brooke reached out and squeezed his wrist gently. I'm not saying you owe the Navy anything, but I think you owe yourself something. You still have that spark. You just buried it. Before Raymond could answer, a knock sounded on the side door. Sam stuck his head in. Sorry to interrupt, he said, eyes darting between them. Just finished stacking the last of the wood. Thought I'd let you know. Raymond nodded. Thanks, kid. Come inside. I've got something to run by you. They gathered at the dining table, and Raymond laid it all out. Drake's bet, the submarine, the challenge. Sam whistled low. Damn, you're really gonna do it? I'm considering it, Raymond admitted. Sam leaned forward, elbows on the table. Look, I know I'm not you, but I can hold things down here for a while. You've taught me a lot these past 2 years. The fields are prepped, the equipment's tuned, and we've only got light plumbing calls this week. If this is something you need to do, I've got your back. Raymond studied the young man across from him. Sam's face was earnest, his posture steady. He saw in him the same raw potential he once had, and the same hunger to prove himself. You sure? Raymond asked. Absolutely, Sam said. Besides, it's not every day your boss gets called to fix a nuclear sub. That's a story I'd like to tell my kids someday. Raymond chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. He turned back to Brooke, who met his gaze with a mix of hope and pride. You don't have to carry the past forever, Dad, she said quietly. Sometimes the only way to let go of ghosts is to face them. Raymond looked out the window. The last of the daylight was fading, casting long blue shadows across the empty fields. His land, his life, but maybe not his only purpose. All right, he said finally. I'll do it, but not for Drake, and not for the money. Brooke tilted her head. Then why? Raymond's voice was steady. Because people think tradesmen are just muscle without minds, because kids like Sam deserve a shot, and because I need to remember what I used to be good at. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows softly. But inside, something else stirred, quiet, determined, and long overdue. Raymond stood stiffly at the security gate of the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, the wind coming off the water sharp enough to sting. His battered flannel jacket, though clean, looked woefully out of place against the sea of uniforms and pressed suits flowing in and out of the base. A young guard behind the glass eyed his ID with mild suspicion. Raymond McAllister? The guard asked, flipping through a clipboard. You're here on civilian clearance? Raymond nodded, voice steady. That's right, consulting on the Defender. The guard squinted, then picked up the phone. A brief conversation followed before the gate finally buzzed open. You'll be escorted to command. Wait there. Raymond stepped through, toolbox in hand. The clang of steel underfoot, the scent of salt and diesel in the air, the low hum of generators. It all came rushing back. Years had passed, but the base hadn't changed much. What had changed, he realized, was him. As he walked across the tarmac, a group of junior officers passed by. One of them, a lanky ensign with too much confidence, muttered just loud enough, "Guess they're letting farmers run diagnostics now." The others chuckled, and Raymond didn't bother responding. He'd learned a long time ago that silence cut deeper than comebacks. A stern-faced woman in her early 30s approached. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, and the silver bars on her collar gleamed. "Mr. McAllister?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Lieutenant Dana Foster. Admiral Hale will meet us in the Situation Room. Follow me." They walked briskly through the main building, past thick glass doors and rows of buzzing equipment. Screens flickered with schematics and real-time diagnostic data. Raymond kept his eyes open, already piecing together fragments of the submarine systems from stray diagrams, and overheard technical chatter. Inside the Situation Room, Admiral Hale stood at a table flanked by several engineers, all in uniform. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. "Mr. McAllister," he said without extending a hand, "appreciate you making the trip." Raymond gave a curt nod. "Appreciate the opportunity." "You're not here as a guest. This is a military vessel with classified systems. You'll be monitored at all times. Any recommendations you make go through Lieutenant Foster." "I understand." "Good," Hale said, motioning toward a screen at the front of the room. "We're going to show you what we've been dealing with." The schematic that appeared was a sprawling maze of lines, symbols, and blinking nodes. "This is the Defender's integrated water purification and distribution system," Foster began. "The contamination began in the primary tank 3 weeks ago. We isolated, replaced, and pressure tested every component. Still, the problem resurfaces." Raymond leaned forward, scanning the layout. His eyes narrowed. "What's this?" he asked, pointing to a junction labeled APCS-S1. "That's part of the atmospheric pressure control system," Foster replied. "Totally separate from the water system." Raymond raised an eyebrow. "Separate on paper?" A few chuckles rang out from the back of the room. One officer muttered, "Here we go." Foster stiffened, but didn't respond. Raymond continued. "Ma'am, could I get full schematics? Water and air systems, including pressure diagrams if you've got them." Foster glanced at Hale. The Admiral didn't move, but his voice was firm. "Give him what he needs." A moment later, a tablet was placed in Raymond's hands. He sat in the corner quietly, thumbing through the schematics, zooming in on crossover points, overlaying pressure flow maps. The chatter around him faded as he fell into the rhythm of analysis. For all the years away, his brain still saw systems like living organisms, where pressure built like blood, where flow meant life, and where weakness bred failure. He stood suddenly, scanning the room. "You got a whiteboard?" Foster frowned. "Why?" "I need to map something, easier to see this way." Reluctantly, someone rolled in a dry erase board. Raymond grabbed a marker and began sketching. Slow, deliberate lines crisscrossing the board, circles drawn to indicate pressure junctions, arrows for flow direction. "This is what your system looks like on paper," he said, drawing 2 side-by-side systems. Air on the left, water on the right. "Clean separation. Now here's what it might look like in practice." He added new lines, dashed, less obvious, tracing how pressure from the air system could, under certain failure conditions, leak through to the water system. At a shared bulkhead, a small, insignificant overlap on the blueprint, but potentially catastrophic. "Right here," Raymond said, tapping the point with the marker. "If your pressure balance in the APCS is off by even a few psi, and there's any weakness in the partition, microfractures, hairline fatigue, you'll get backflow. Contaminants won't stay isolated." The room had gone quiet. Foster stepped forward, staring at the diagram. "We've replaced that entire panel." Raymond nodded, but not the wall behind it. Admiral Hale approached slowly, arms still crossed. "You're saying the problem isn't a faulty component, but system interaction?" Raymond capped the marker. "Exactly. You're fixing the symptoms, but the cause is hiding between systems." One of the younger engineers stood. "We ran pressure tests. Everything was within limits." "Sure," Raymond replied. Static limits. But what about real-time fluctuation? Flow surges, emergency overrides, heat differentials. No one answered. Raymond took a step back from the board. I'm not claiming to have the answer yet, but if I were you, I'd start there. The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then Hale spoke. Foster, I want real-time pressure logs for the last 2 weeks, both systems, and get someone to inspect that bulkhead. Foster hesitated. Sir, we've already... Do it! She nodded and moved quickly out of the room, calling commands into her comm. Hale turned to Raymond, his voice quieter now. You may be onto something. Don't get comfortable. Raymond didn't smile. He just nodded once and picked up his toolbox. I didn't come here for comfort, Admiral. I came to fix what's broken. The corridor inside the USS Defender was narrower than Raymond remembered from his Navy days, though maybe it wasn't the corridor that had shrunk, but his sense of time. Decades had passed since he'd last walked through a submarine's steel-clad spine, but the hum of machinery, the metallic tang in the air, and the steady rhythm of systems pulsing through the vessel's body, all of it came rushing back like a forgotten melody. Behind him, boots clanged in lockstep. Chief Petty Officer Alex Ramirez led the way, stocky and stone-faced. Lieutenant Dana Foster followed just behind Raymond, arms crossed, eyes sharp and unreadable. You sure you remember how to navigate one of these, Farmer? Ramirez muttered without looking back. I remember enough, Raymond replied coolly. Just stay out of the crew's way. Some of them don't take kindly to civilians, especially ones who think they're going to solve the Navy's toughest problems with a wrench and a hunch. Foster shot Ramirez a glance, but said nothing. Raymond didn't answer. He was too focused on the way the pipes ran along the ceiling, bundled like nerves, coiled with pressure. The heat was different down here, denser. You didn't just feel it, you heard it, in the buzz of relays and the whisper of circulation. They stopped outside a sealed access panel near the engineering core. This is one of the problem zones, Foster said, keying in a security override. We've replaced every component visible to the eye and some that weren't. Still can't isolate the source of contamination. Raymond crouched beside the hatch as it hissed open. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small LED flashlight and a flexible inspection mirror. Ramirez gave a short laugh. No high-tech scopes, no digital readouts, just gonna eyeball it? Raymond tilted the mirror toward the piping inside the wall and answered without looking up. Sometimes you have to see how the system breathes, not how it looks on a screen. Foster leaned in beside him, her voice quieter now. This is the shared interface between the water purification and atmospheric control systems. They're technically isolated, but some of the structural housing overlaps. That's what I figured, Raymond muttered. He ran his hand along the panel seam where the two systems shared mounting points. The metal was cold to the touch, but there was a faint residue around the bolts, discoloration that didn't belong. See this? He said, motioning for Ramirez to hand him the flashlight. Subtle pitting in the weld, doesn't look like much, but over time, under pressure differentials. Foster knelt beside him. You think there's a breach? Microfractures, Raymond said. Tiny enough to go undetected in standard inspections, but large enough for trace contaminants to pass through under certain pressure conditions. Ramirez frowned. That'd mean that your air control system is creating negative pressure relative to the water system, Raymond finished. When the balance tips, it pulls water vapor, and whatever's in it, back through the wall. Foster leaned back, processing. The systems were designed to function independently. This shouldn't happen. Raymond looked her in the eye. Designs don't always account for long-term stress. Temperature shifts, vibration fatigue, emergency purge cycles. Over time, the wall becomes a siphon. Ramirez scratched the back of his neck, his earlier sarcasm fading. That would explain why the contamination keeps recurring even after we replace everything. Raymond nodded. You're chasing symptoms, not source. So, what's the fix? Foster asked. Raymond stood slowly, his knees aching slightly from the crouch. First, replace the faulty valve housing on the atmospheric control side, right here. He pointed to a coupling deep inside the shared panel. It's been compensating too hard for downstream inefficiencies. That's what's pulling pressure where it shouldn't. And second, Ramirez asked, Rebalance the systems, equalize flow rates and pressure thresholds, then reinforce the shared bulkhead. You can't afford to have even a pinhole between them. The corridor was quiet for a beat. Then Foster keyed her radio. Lieutenant Foster to Engineering Control. Engineering here. Prepare to bring atmospheric subsystem A offline for manual inspection and valve replacement. And notify damage control we may have structural fatigue in housing panel 11G. There was a pause on the other end. Ma'am, do we have confirmation? Foster looked at Raymond. He nodded once. We have confirmation. Raymond exhaled slowly. It was one thing to see a problem. It was another to be trusted enough to fix it. They returned topside for the update. Admiral Hale was waiting in the ops room, flanked by several senior staff. Report, he said, without looking up from the tablet in his hand. We've found the likely source, Foster began. A shared bulkhead between systems with microfractures. It's allowing trace contamination under negative pressure cycles. Mr. McAllister's theory is sound. Hale looked up slowly. And your recommendation? We replace the valve housing on the APCS, reinforce the shared bulkhead, and rebalance the system pressures. Hale's expression didn't change, but his fingers tapped the tablet a beat longer than necessary. Chief Ramirez? He asked. Ramirez cleared his throat. Sir, I was skeptical, but what Mr. McAllister's describing matches the system behavior we've been seeing. It's plausible, likely even. Hale looked at Raymond for a long moment. You're sure? I wouldn't suggest it if I wasn't, Raymond said evenly. I've seen this kind of failure before. Not on a submarine, but the physics don't care what the hull looks like. The room held its breath. Finally, Hale gave a sharp nod. Authorize the fix. Begin repairs immediately. I want logs from both systems during the process and real-time diagnostics, monitoring post-repair. Foster, Ramirez, see to it personally. The officers moved into action. As the room cleared, Hale stepped beside Raymond. You've got a calm way about you, the Admiral said quietly. Not used to seeing that in the middle of a system crisis. Raymond smiled faintly. Pressure's just part of the job. Hale studied him. You're not a Navy man anymore, but I'll be damned if you didn't just save one of our fleet's most critical vessels. Let's hope this works. Raymond nodded, already running mental checks for the next steps. It will. Systems always tell the truth. You just have to know where to listen. And for the first time since stepping back into this world, he felt something he hadn't expected. Belonging. The hiss of pressurized air filled the maintenance chamber as the final bolts on the reinforced bulkhead snapped into place. Raymond wiped a thin layer of sweat from his brow with the sleeve of his coveralls, then checked the torque one more time for good measure. The new valve housing, custom fabricated using parts from the base's reserves, gleamed under the overhead fluorescence, a stark contrast to the corroded, pitted fixture that had nearly taken down the Defender's entire water system. Chief Petty Officer Ramirez knelt beside him, tightening the secondary brace with precise, practiced movements. Despite the chill in the steel corridors, the two men were sweating, partly from exertion, partly from knowing what was riding on this fix. Moment of truth's coming, Ramirez muttered, glancing toward the pressure gauge clipped to the bulkhead frame. You sure about your calculations? Raymond didn't look up. He was inspecting the line feed connected to the atmospheric pressure control unit, ensuring that the replacement sealant along the seam wouldn't buckle under the coming surge. I didn't bring calculations, Raymond said flatly. I brought instincts, 30 years of them. Ramirez grunted. You really are a farmer. Raymond gave a thin smile. Pressure's pressure. Doesn't matter if it's running through copper, PVC, or titanium composite. If it leaks, it leaks. With a final twist of the wrench, the repairs were complete. Ramirez tapped the side of the valve twice and stood up. Let's get topside. Time to see if your farm boy voodoo actually holds. Back in the control room, the atmosphere was taut. A low murmur drifted between engineering officers, some hunched over diagnostics terminals, others monitoring test protocols projected onto wall displays. Lieutenant Foster stood by the primary interface console, her posture stiff, jaw tight. Admiral Hale stood behind her, arms crossed, saying nothing. The room dimmed slightly as the submarine's internal system adjusted for the upcoming restart cycle. Raymond entered with Ramirez at his side. A few glances flicked in his direction, some skeptical, others unreadable. No applause, no cheers, but no laughter either. That alone was progress. "All stations report ready," Foster said, addressing the room. A chorus of acknowledgements followed. "Commencing Stage 1, restart. Atmospheric system initialization," she continued. "Mr. McAllister, would you like to confirm baseline pressures?" Raymond stepped up to the monitor and tapped a few keys. The numbers populated, PSI readings across both the air and water subsystems, all well within predicted range. "Everything looks steady," he said. "Pressure is balanced, no spikes." Foster nodded. "Stage 1 active." A soft hum vibrated through the deck plates as the air system came online. No warning lights, no fluctuations. Raymond exhaled through his nose and leaned in closer to the readout, watching the pressure stabilize across zones A through D. If the fracture repair didn't hold, they'd see it here first, in a dip, a hiccup, a contamination flag. 30 seconds in, Foster announced. No anomalies. "Still early," Ramirez whispered beside Raymond, not looking up. They all knew the last time they'd hit 10 minutes without error, only to have the contamination flare up in the auxiliary purification line. That kind of failure wouldn't just cause embarrassment this time, it would shut down Defender's deployment indefinitely, grounding one of the Navy's most advanced submarines while competitors kept moving. "Stage 2, bringing water purification online," Foster said, her fingers moving with mechanical precision across the interface. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Raymond crossed his arms, eyes glued to the junction pressure readings. It was like waiting for a heartbeat to falter. One misaligned valve, one overlooked seal, and everything would spiral again. 5 minutes passed. No red lights, no fluctuation. 10 minutes. A small crowd had gathered near the back of the room, crew, maintenance officers, even a couple of communication staff. "Pressure differential at the bulkhead remains steady," Foster reported, her voice more confident now. 15 minutes. Ramirez finally let out a breath. "I'll be damned." At 20 minutes, an engineer who'd been quietly working at the diagnostics console turned and said, "We're getting clean return data through the secondary filters. No cross-system contamination. None." By the 30-minute mark, the tension in the room had begun to crack. Raymond stepped away from the monitor and leaned against the side console. He wasn't celebrating, not yet. He knew systems could fake stability. It was like a broken well pump. Just because water flowed didn't mean the seal wasn't leaking into the crawl space. Foster looked up. "We've cleared our critical runtime benchmark. Protocol dictates full system diagnostics over the next hour, but initial results show..." She hesitated, then looked at Raymond. "A completely functional system." Ramirez clapped once, loud in the silent room. "You pulled it off, Mr. McAllister." Still, Raymond said nothing. Admiral Hale finally stepped forward, the clack of his boots the only sound for a few seconds. He didn't speak right away, just stared at the readout, then turned to Raymond. "You were right," he said plainly. Raymond looked at him. "That's not the part that matters." Hale cocked an eyebrow. "Oh?" "What matters is that the fix holds," Raymond replied. "Not for an hour or a day, for the long haul." The Admiral studied him. "We'll know soon enough. But I've seen enough to know this. Your insight saved us weeks of work, and probably millions in diagnostic costs. You may not wear a uniform, Mr. McAllister, but you've just done more for this sub than half the folks who built her." Raymond gave a small nod of appreciation, but inside, something deeper stirred. Satisfaction, sure. But also, a quiet ache. He hadn't done this for recognition. He'd done it to prove, mostly to himself, that after all these years, he still understood how things worked, that he could still fix something broken. Back in the hallway outside the control room, Ramirez leaned against the bulkhead, arms folded. "I gotta admit," he said, "didn't think you had it in you." Raymond smiled. "That makes two of us." They walked the corridor together in silence, the submarine humming with renewed life behind them. Below their feet, the systems flowed clean and pressurized, balanced, for now at least. Sterling Drake's helicopter touched down on the tarmac outside the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard with the kind of dramatic flair only someone like him could orchestrate. The wind from the rotor blades whipped across the open yard as naval personnel shielded their eyes, and Raymond stood just off to the side, arms crossed, unimpressed. Drake descended the steps wearing an immaculate suit. No tie, of course, just enough rebellion to feel superior. His expression was unreadable behind his sunglasses, but Raymond could tell from the stiff way he adjusted his cuffs that the man wasn't used to being wrong, and now he'd have to admit it, in public no less. "Mr. McAllister," Drake called as he strode toward him, his voice cutting through the whine of the engines. "Heard you pulled off a miracle." Raymond didn't move. No miracle, just fixing a leak. Drake stopped a few feet away and removed his sunglasses, revealing narrowed eyes that flicked between Raymond and the massive hull of the USS Defender behind him. "You're telling me you solved a 3-week engineering nightmare with a wrench and farm logic?" Raymond gave a small shrug. "Not my first pressure system, just the first one on a submarine." Drake gave a short, humorless laugh. "Well, damn. I guess I owe you." Raymond finally looked him in the eye. "You owe them," he said, nodding toward the line of young sailors and engineers emerging from the sub's rear hatch, their uniforms damp and streaked from the cleanup effort. "And the next generation that's going to fix problems like this when we're gone." Drake's smirk faded, replaced by something closer to curiosity. "You're not collecting the money?" "I don't need it," Raymond replied, "but I want it to go where it matters. Set up a real apprenticeship fund, rural kids, small towns, kids who know how to work but can't afford to get certified." Drake blinked. "You want to fund a trade program?" Raymond nodded. "Your name can be on it if that's what you care about, but the dollars go to them, not me." For a long moment, Drake said nothing. Then he turned, staring out over the dry dock, as if measuring the gravity of the ask. "You know, most people would have taken the check and run," he said quietly. "I'm not most people." "No," Drake muttered, "you're not." Behind them, the heavy doors to the operations center opened, and Admiral Hale emerged, flanked by 2 staff officers. He offered a short nod toward Drake, but went straight for Raymond. "Mr. McAllister," Hale said, "we just finished the 12-hour diagnostics. Every subsystem is functioning within normal range. We're clearing Defender for redeployment next week." Raymond let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was official now. The fix had held, not just a patch, but a solution. "Which brings me to this," Hale continued, lowering his voice. "We've got similar issues on at least 3 other Virginia-class subs. My team has been trying to model your fix, but I'd rather have the man himself oversee the implementation." Raymond narrowed his eyes. "You're offering me a job?" "A temporary consulting role," Hale clarified. 6 weeks, civilian contractor. Help our engineers apply your pressure compensation solution across the fleet." Raymond glanced down at his hands, calloused, rough, stained with decades of grease and soil. This wasn't the life he had planned. Certainly not at this age. But somewhere between replacing a cracked titanium valve and rebalancing a compromised bulkhead, something inside him had reawakened. It wasn't pride, it was purpose. "I'll need time to talk it over with my daughter," Raymond said slowly. "And someone has to keep the farm running." Hale nodded. "Of course, but I'd like your answer soon. The Resolute is next in line, and she docks in Portsmouth in 10 days. As if on cue, Raymond's phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped away a few feet and answered. "Hey, Dad," Brooks' voice came through, breathless and excited. "I just saw a headline on Channel 7. Farmer fixes nuclear submarine." "You didn't tell me it went that well," Raymond chuckled softly. "It was more than just me." "Still," she pressed, "they're calling you the Submarine Whisperer. People are posting diagrams of your valve fix like it's the next great invention." "I didn't do this to get famous, Brooke." "I know, Dad. That's what makes it so incredible. Everyone's talking about how you walked in there with a toolbox and changed the Navy's entire approach to diagnostics." Raymond looked out toward the sea. "They want me to stay on, consult on the other boats." Brooks' voice softened. "That's huge, Dad. But is that what you want?" He paused. "I'm not sure. The work matters, but the attention doesn't sit right with me." There was a beat of silence before Brooke replied. "Then don't chase the spotlight. Chase the impact. Make the system better. Help the next kid like Sam figure out they have a future." Raymond glanced toward the nearby warehouse, where young sailors walked past in pairs, laughing now, the tension of earlier days seemingly gone. He saw a version of Sam in all of them, kids with raw skills and not enough chances. "I'll call you tonight," he said quietly. "We've got some decisions to make." "Proud of you, Dad," Brooks said before hanging up. Raymond turned back to Hale and Drake. "I'll take the consulting role," he said, "on one condition." Hale raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "I bring someone with me, Sam Whitaker, my apprentice. If I'm doing this, he's learning alongside me." Hale cracked the barest smile. "I'll see that he gets clearance." Drake crossed his arms, considering the moment. "And the apprenticeship program?" Raymond asked pointedly. Drake exhaled. "Fine. We'll start with a pilot. My people will draft a proposal by Monday." Raymond gave a small nod, then extended a hand. Drake hesitated, then shook it. "You know this is going to make headlines, right?" "I don't care about headlines," Raymond said. "I care about pipelines." Drake blinked. "You mean plumbing?" "I mean opportunity," Raymond replied. "Same principle. Build it strong, make sure it flows the right way, and fix the leaks when they happen." As Drake turned toward his helicopter, barking into his phone already, Admiral Hale lingered beside Raymond. "You're not what I expected," Hale admitted. Raymond smiled faintly. "Most people aren't." As the rotors of Drake's chopper kicked up dust and the sky turned gold with the late afternoon sun, Raymond stood at the edge of something he hadn't felt in years: momentum. Not just in his career, but in the lives he was about to help shape. And somewhere deep down, the quiet grief that had shadowed him for so long stirred, less sharp now, less lonely, replaced by a sense of motion. The system was restarting, not just on the Defender, but in him. And this time, he was ready for what came next. The morning fog hung low over the shipyard as Raymond and Sam stepped onto the Portsmouth Naval Base once again. It was Sam's first time in uniform, navy blue coveralls with his name stenciled in white over the breast pocket. He looked down at it nervously as they passed the security checkpoint. "This feels weird," Sam mumbled, adjusting the strap of his toolbox. "Like I'm wearing someone else's clothes." Raymond smirked. "You'll sweat into it soon enough. Then it'll be yours." As they cleared the final gate, a young Navy ensign greeted them and offered brisk directions to the USS Resolute, the next Virginia-class sub scheduled for Raymond's diagnostic retrofit. Unlike the Defender, the Resolute wasn't in crisis, yet, but early signs of system instability had been reported, and Raymond was brought in to preempt the worst. The two men approached the dry dock, where the sleek hull of the submarine loomed ahead like a sleeping sea monster. The Resolute was dry and silent, prepped for inspection. Sam swallowed hard. "That thing's massive." Raymond gave a nod. "And every inch of it breathes. That's what you've got to remember. It's not just a machine. It's a system, a balance, like the farm." Inside the operations tent, several officers and engineers stood clustered around schematics. A tall man in his late 30s, clean-shaven and sharp-eyed, spotted them and stepped forward. "You must be Mr. McAllister," he said, extending a hand. "Lieutenant Miles Vickers, engineering officer." Raymond shook his hand. "And this is my apprentice, Sam Whitaker." Vickers barely glanced at Sam. "Right." The intern Sam flushed but said nothing. "We've prepped the atmospheric and water purification schematics," Vickers continued, leading them inside. "We've made some of the modifications you proposed for the Defender, but I still think the contamination issue was an isolated anomaly, possibly even a manufacturing defect." Raymond looked over the blueprints. "Possibly, but these systems weren't designed to interact. In reality, they do." Vickers's lips tightened. "That's one interpretation." Raymond said nothing more. He'd dealt with Vickers's type before. Too smart for their own good, too insecure to admit it. But he wasn't here to win an argument. He was here to spot trouble before it became tragedy. As the team entered the mechanical corridor aboard the Resolute, the air shifted, literally. There was a faint metallic tang, a whisper of pressure imbalance that Raymond felt more than heard. Sam stayed close, eyes wide, absorbing everything. Vickers pointed out the modifications they had installed based on Raymond's previous suggestions. We reinforced the shared bulkhead, replaced the valve housing. Everything's within spec. Raymond crouched near a junction. Can I see the diagnostic logs for the humidity control system? Vickers frowned. They're not relevant. The humidity controls are reading fine. I'd still like to see them. Reluctantly, Vickers passed the tablet over. Raymond handed it to Sam. Start with the past 48 hours. Look for dips in chamber pressure, not spikes. Sam scrolled through the data, his brow furrowed. There's a drop here, 0.8 psi, then another half a ps. 12 hours later. Consistent direction? Raymond asked. Yeah, Sam said, nodding. Each time, slight negative pressure, but it rebounds. Raymond stood. That's the beginning. Vickers crossed his arms. Beginning of what? A leak, Sam said before Raymond could answer. Just like on the Defender. Only smaller, but it's building. Vickers blinked, surprised that the answer came from Sam. Raymond turned to the lieutenant. You see it now? Vickers hesitated, then gave a small nod. Let's confirm with a physical inspection. 2 hours later, after winding through service tunnels and descending into the air handling compartment, Raymond and Sam found it, a hairline fracture in the valve housing flange, right at the convergence point between water purification and atmospheric control. Sam spotted it first. There, he said, crouching with his flashlight, his gloved hand pointing to a thin, glistening line. Raymond examined it, impressed. Good eye. It looked off in the schematics, Sam said. Too much thermal stress for that junction point. Vickers, watching from behind, said nothing, but his posture shifted, less defensive, more attentive. Back topside, the team reconvened in the briefing tent. Raymond stood at the whiteboard, sketching out the failure point and airflow trajectory. Sam hovered nearby, adding notes, connecting subsystems. Vickers finally spoke. You were right. The same interaction's happening here, if we hadn't caught it early. Raymond nodded. You would have been where Defender was, or worse. He turned to Sam. You found the fracture. Explain your reasoning. Sam hesitated at first, then stepped forward. His voice was unsure at first, but steadying. I looked for pressure drops where the system should have been stable, he said, gesturing toward the diagram. Not big spikes, those would trip alarms, but tiny dips, things that feel like noise if you don't know what to look for. That's how it started before, right? Raymond smiled. Exactly. The engineers around the room exchanged glances, some scribbling notes. Lieutenant Vickers looked at Sam, genuinely now. How long have you been in the trade? 3 years, Sam said. And you saw that before I did, Vickers admitted. Impressive. Raymond caught Sam's slight grin, half pride, half disbelief. After the meeting, as the team dispersed, Raymond clapped a hand on Sam's shoulder. You did well today. Sam looked at him, wide-eyed. I didn't think I'd know enough, but it was like everything you've been showing me just clicked. Raymond nodded. That's how it works. You build the mental map. Then one day, you can see the flow even before it starts. They walked back toward their quarters, the sun beginning to dip behind the dry docks. Sam looked up. Think I could do this for real? Like, not just as your assistant? You already are, Raymond said. You just proved it. As they reached the barracks, a text buzzed on Raymond's phone from Admiral Hale. Impressive work. Recommends Sam for level 1 contractor clearance. Let's give him a real seat at the table. Raymond smiled and turned the screen toward Sam. His apprentice stared at it, stunned. You've got fire in you, Raymond said softly. And now you're in it. Let's see what you do next. The chapter was no longer about Raymond's legacy. It was about Sam's beginning. By the time Raymond and Sam returned to the Portsmouth base the next morning, the headlines had already gone viral. Farmer saves the Navy. Submarine crisis solved by rural mechanic. From barn to battleship, Mr. McAllister's unbelievable fix. Raymond stared at the glowing phone screen in disbelief as Sam sat across from him in the mess hall, grinning behind a bowl of cornflakes. They even got your picture in front of the Resolute, Sam said, sliding his phone across the table. You look intense. Raymond squinted at the image. He looked exhausted. His hair was windblown, his eyes sunken. But the caption underneath was worse. The humble hero, Navy turns, to farmer after engineers fail. That's not what happened, Raymond muttered. Sam leaned in. You should see the comments. People love you. Raymond shook his head slowly. That's not the story we're supposed to be telling. The base commander's assistant interrupted breakfast with a knock and a clipboard. Mr. McAllister, Admiral Hale would like to see you in the press tent. You have a conference scheduled in 20 minutes. Raymond blinked. I have a what? Press conference. Mr. Drake arranged it. You'll be joined by Admiral Hale and Lieutenant Foster. Sam raised his eyebrows. Guess they want to make it official. Raymond's stomach tightened. He had faced military boards, fought machinery in flooded basements, and buried the love of his life without shedding a tear. But public speaking, to cameras, reporters, that was a different kind of pressure. The press tent near the harbor was filled to capacity. Reporters from local and national outlets jostled for front row spots. A podium was set in front of a large Navy SEAL, flanked by American flags. Bright lights shone hot across the stage. Raymond stood off to the side, shoulders stiff under a borrowed sport coat. His name tag was crooked. Sterling, smooth as ever, was already working the crowd, shaking hands and tossing out well-rehearsed sound bites. It's not every day a farmer rewrites military protocol, he said loudly enough for multiple mics to pick up. Raymond winced. Admiral Hale stepped up beside him. Relax, Mr. McAllister. Just speak truth. That's what they're here for. Raymond looked at the Admiral. They're here for a spectacle. I'm not interested in being anyone's headline. Then change the headline. That was all the permission Raymond needed. When it was finally his turn, Sterling introduced him with grand gestures, calling him a symbol of American grit and ingenuity. Raymond stepped up to the microphone, blinking against the camera flashes. He gripped the podium tightly. I appreciate the kind words, he began, his voice rough and quiet, but clear. But I'm not a hero. I'm a mechanic. I saw a problem and tried to fix it, that's all. The reporters shifted, their pens briefly paused. I didn't fix that submarine alone. Navy engineers gave me access. Technicians followed my lead. Admiral Hale gave me room to speak, and my apprentice spotted the first sign of trouble. He paused, looking out over the sea of unfamiliar faces. This isn't a story about farmers beating engineers. It's about what happens when we stop dividing knowledge into silos. It's about collaboration. Someone from the back shouted a question. Do you think trade workers deserve more credit in fields like defense and tech? Raymond nodded. Not just credit, opportunity. We've spent decades convincing young people that the only respectable future is behind a desk. But real-world systems don't run on theories alone. They run on people who know how pressure moves through a pipe, who can feel a failing valve before a sensor detects it, who understand things you can't always teach in a textbook. Another hand shot up. What do you say to critics who think your success was just a fluke? Raymond smiled, just a little. I say let's give more people the chance to fluke their way into fixing something that matters. Sterling stepped forward to rescue the narrative, sensing things drifting from his branding script. Which is why I'm proud to announce the launch of the Drake McAllister Apprenticeship Fund, a program for rural youth to learn hands-on trades at no cost, backed by private donors and defense partnerships. Raymond's smile faded slightly. Actually, he said into the mic, we're working on a model that includes both rural and urban candidates, and it won't bear just our names. It'll carry the names of every mentor and apprentice who shows what this kind of learning can do. There was a pause, then, surprisingly, applause. By the next day, Raymond's words had gone further than any pipe he'd ever laid. Social media exploded with hashtags like Just Hands and Brains and Just Respect the Trades. Even networks like CNN and Fox News ran short segments with highlights from the press conference. Sam sent Raymond a clip of a roundtable debate where a university professor defended the need for trade education reform, quoting Raymond's line about feeling a failing valve before a sensor detects it. Back home, Brooke called late that night. Her voice was breathless. Dad, you're all over my Twitter feed. They're calling you the voice of common sense. Raymond chuckled. God help us. No, seriously, she continued. You're making people talk about apprenticeships in a way no one has in years. One of my coworkers said she wished her brother had someone like you growing up. Raymond looked out the window of his base housing unit, the harbor glistening beneath the moonlight. It's not about me. I know that, Brooke said, but the thing is, you're not just fixing pipes anymore. You're fixing the story people believe about who gets to matter. Raymond was silent for a moment. Then he said, almost to himself, let's just hope they keep listening. Outside, the Navy ships stood quiet and powerful in their berths, but a new current had begun flowing, one not in the pipes, but in the hearts and minds of a country ready to reimagine the value of its working hands. Raymond was waist-deep in schematics when the call came. Lieutenant Foster stood just outside the door of the Naval Engineering office, holding out a phone with an urgent look. It's your apprentice, she said. Says it's important. Raymond's stomach knotted. He grabbed the phone. Sam? Raymond, it's the Riverside retirement home back in Ashland. Water main ruptured under the east wing. The whole building's flooding from below. They're evacuating residents right now. It's bad, real bad. Raymond's mind snapped into gear. How deep's the main buried? 8 feet. The slab's cracking. Foundations at risk. City crews are overwhelmed. 3 other breaks in town already. They asked if you could get here. Raymond didn't hesitate. Tell them I'm coming. Get whatever pumps you can and make sure they shut off the main supply upstream. He hung up, already pulling off his gloves. Foster looked at him. Emergency. Town retirement home. Structural failure from a busted main. We stabilized billion-dollar submarines, Foster. I've got seniors in wheelchairs about to lose their roof. I need to go. She gave a curt nod. I'll call Admiral Hale. He'll understand. Within the hour, a Navy helicopter was fueling on the airstrip, and Raymond was strapped in the back, gear bag in hand, heart pounding as the coastline blurred beneath them. The helicopter descended onto the high school baseball field behind Riverside Retirement just after dusk. A small crowd had gathered, watching in disbelief as the military aircraft touched down. Raymond leapt out, met by Sam, who had a flashlight in one hand and a look of frantic relief in the other. 4 feet of water in the basement, Raymond, he said over the roar of rotors. The east wing's already sagging. We've got a temporary pump running, but the soil's shifting fast. They raced to the site in a battered pickup truck. Raymond could see fire department hoses snaking through the grass, power generators humming, and elderly residents wrapped in blankets on the front lawn. Inside the facility, chaos reigned. Nurses ran back and forth with emergency supplies. Water seeped from under baseboards. The air was heavy with humidity and panic. Raymond stomped into the basement, flashlight beam cutting through the murky flood. A geyser shot upward from a broken pipe in the concrete. There, Sam pointed. It's split along the entire length. That's the main feeding half the grid. Raymond surveyed the mess. The concrete slab was buckling from below. Metal rebar twisted like wire ties. If they didn't act quickly, the entire structure could begin collapsing from foundation loss. We're going to have to expose the full length of the pipe, Raymond said. Stabilize the soil around it, build a temporary channel to reroute the water, and reinforce the slab with jacks. Sam nodded. Already got 2 jacks from the firehouse. Peterson's crew is sending a 3rd. Raymond looked at his apprentice. You're thinking ahead. I'm proud of you. They got to work. Through the night, the 2 of them led a team of volunteers, maintenance workers, and a couple off-duty city plumbers who'd shown up after hearing Raymond was back. They dug trenches with shovels and backhoes. They pumped water in shifts. Raymond used duct tape, zip ties, and sheer ingenuity to keep their temporary bypass from bursting. At 3 a.m., he finally stepped back from the newly sleeved section of pipe and exhaled. The flood was stemmed. The slab was stable. Raymond, Sam said, panting beside him, you did it. Raymond shook his head. We did it. Upstairs, residents began returning to their rooms. Nurses hugged volunteers. A weary building inspector approached Raymond with a clipboard. If you hadn't gotten here when you did, we might have condemned the whole wing by sunrise. A car pulled into the driveway. Out stepped State Representative Linda Carver and the town mayor, Frank Wilson. Heard the Navy flew you in, Mayor Wilson said. You make a habit of saving the town now, Mr. McAllister. Raymond wiped his hands on a towel. Only when the plumbing's about to swallow a building. Carver stepped forward. I saw you on TV last week, talking about trade apprenticeships. I figured that was for headlines, but now I see it in action. She looked around the site, the patched pipe, the exhausted but proud faces. I'm proposing state funding for pilot trade programs in rural counties, she said. We need more Raymonds, more Sams, people who can lead under pressure. Would you consult with us? Help us build something like your Navy model, but here in New Hampshire? Raymond blinked. It wasn't national news. It wasn't Congress, but it was home. I'd be honored, he said. By dawn, Raymond sat on the hood of Sam's pickup truck, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup. His coveralls were soaked, his boots caked in red clay. You know, Sam said, sitting beside him, when I started learning this stuff, I didn't think we'd be fixing submarines one week and holding up buildings the next. Raymond laughed. Neither did I, but plumbing's like life. Pressure builds, things leak. You've got to pay attention before it blows. Sam looked thoughtful. Think we could build a school for this? A real one? Not just patch jobs and overtime? Raymond stared at the pink sky, the sun rising over a town that still stood because they'd been there in time. Yeah, he said quietly. I think we already have the foundation. He didn't need a title. He didn't need the headlines. The real work, the important work, was still here. Beneath the ground, behind the walls, inside the minds of people just waiting for someone to believe in them. And that was a legacy worth building. The marble halls of the Capitol were colder than Raymond expected, not just in temperature, but in tone. They echoed with a kind of distant reverence, a reminder that history was made here, often by people in expensive suits and carefully measured words. As he stepped through security and into the ornate congressional chamber, Raymond tugged at the collar of his borrowed blazer. It felt tight around his neck, like it didn't belong there, just like him. Admiral Hale had flown in with him, offering quiet reassurance during the flight. Now, Hale moved a few paces ahead, speaking with staffers and ushering Raymond into a waiting room where other witnesses sat, thumbing through notes or muttering to themselves. Raymond had neither notes nor a script. Just 3 decades of experience, a pair of calloused hands, and a mind trained by decades of solving mechanical problems in silence. Sam Whitaker, dressed sharply in a Navy suit that still bore the fresh creases of its packaging, had insisted on coming. He now sat quietly in the gallery, eyes fixed on the podium where his mentor would soon speak. Raymond had watched the young man grow from a directionless drifter to a promising tradesman, and seeing him here, nervous, proud, gave Raymond a deeper purpose. When the clerk called his name, Raymond rose. The chair of the Congressional Subcommittee on Workforce and Education, Senator Linda Gaines from Massachusetts, greeted him with a polite smile. Around her, a semicircle of lawmakers, aides, and press watched with guarded curiosity. Cameras rolled, pens poised. Mr. McAllister, Senator Gaines began, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Raymond leaned forward to the microphone. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Raymond McAllister. I run a family farm in New Hampshire, and I'm a former Navy mechanical engineer. A few weeks ago, I helped identify and fix a pressure systems issue on a nuclear submarine that had stumped a lot of good people. I didn't do it because I'm smarter than them. I did it because I've spent my whole life solving problems with my hands. He paused, glancing at Sam in the gallery. The young man gave him a subtle nod. This testimony isn't about me, Raymond continued. It's about what we're missing and how we prepare young people for the real world. We've told an entire generation that success only comes through a 4-year degree. We've told them that working with your hands means settling for less. That's not just wrong. It's dangerous. A murmur ran through the chamber. Raymond pushed forward. I took on an apprentice, Sam. A few years ago, he didn't know the difference between a pipe wrench and a pressure gauge. Now he can diagnose and repair systems that would make some engineers scratch their heads, not because he's less intelligent, because he was given the chance to learn differently. Senator Howard Langston from Connecticut leaned forward, fingers steepled. Mr. McAllister, critics of this apprenticeship initiative argue that trade-focused programs might shortchange students of a well-rounded education. They worry we'll create a subclass of narrowly trained, less educated citizens. What do you say to that? Raymond met the senator's gaze head-on. With all due respect, Senator, being able to quote Shakespeare doesn't help you when your water heater bursts at 2 a.m. Being educated doesn't mean memorizing facts. It means knowing how to think, how to adapt, how to contribute. Whether you wear a suit or steel-toe boots, intelligence comes in many forms. Langston's eyebrows arched, but he said nothing more. Another senator chimed in, this one from California. But how do we ensure these programs aren't exploited, that they don't become pipelines to low-wage labor? Raymond nodded thoughtfully. By building them with dignity in mind, with standards, with mentorship. I didn't teach Sam to fix pipes. I taught him to think like a problem solver. That mindset is transferable. The trades don't limit potential. They reveal it. In the gallery, Sam blinked hard, his eyes glistening. Senator Gaines leaned into her mic. Mr. McAllister, what would federal support mean for this scholarship program you and Mr. Drake proposed? Raymond smiled slightly. It would mean a kid in a town like mine doesn't have to choose between debt and dignity. It would mean someone who's good with their hands can find a path as honorable as any desk job. And it would mean this country finally starts valuing all types of intelligence. The room held still for a moment after he finished. Then Gaines nodded. Thank you, Mr. McAllister. That was illuminating. The hearing continued, but Raymond's words had shifted the atmosphere. Reporters whispered to each other. Staffers typed furiously. Sam sat upright, a fire lit in his chest. He saw, perhaps for the first time, that the man who taught him plumbing might also be shaping national policy. When the session ended, several senators approached Raymond, shaking his hand, asking for further conversations. One offered to tour his farm, another asked to speak with Sam. The humble farmer from New Hampshire had not just fixed a submarine, he'd cracked open a national conversation. That night, over dinner at a quiet diner with Sam and Brooke, who had flown in for the occasion, Raymond was uncharacteristically quiet. You okay, Dad? Brooke asked. He looked at them both, smiled gently. I think I just found another system that needs fixing, and I'm not done yet. The first frost came early that October morning, laying a thin silver sheen across the fields of McAllister Farm. Raymond stood on the porch, cradling a chipped coffee mug between both hands, the steam curling up into the chill air. Beyond the fields, the last of the sunflowers sagged with the season's weight, but to Raymond, they looked more like sentinels, tired, but standing proud. It had been a year of storms, both literal and figurative, but somehow the farm had endured. Inside the house, the kitchen radio hummed softly, reporting on the latest development from Capitol Hill. The Drake McAllister Trade Scholarship was officially launching in 20 states, with more expected to join by spring. Applications had opened just a week prior, and already over 15,000 young people had applied. Raymond still couldn't quite believe it. His name, his family's name, attached to something that big. Down at the barn, Sam was already at work, rolling out fencing for the north pasture. He'd been more focused lately, more confident in the way he moved through tasks. When Raymond joined him, he didn't look up right away. Governor's office called again this morning, Sam said casually. They want you to speak at a state conference on workforce development next month. Raymond grunted. Do they now? Yeah, said they'd fly you out. Hotel, driver, the whole deal. Raymond tugged on his gloves. I'm guessing they don't know I prefer fence posts to microphones. Sam chuckled. They'll learn. Raymond watched him for a moment, saw how his hands instinctively checked the wire tension, adjusted angles. 3 years ago, Sam didn't even know how to hold a wrench properly. Now he was fielding governor calls like it was nothing. Later that afternoon, they drove into town for a meeting at the vocational center. A small auditorium had been converted into a community info session for the new apprenticeship track linked to the scholarship program. A fresh banner read, "The future of skilled trades starts here." Inside, the energy was undeniable. Parents, high school students, educators, all buzzing with a rare optimism. Raymond was ushered to the front by the program director, who introduced him as the reason any of this is even possible. He hated the spotlight, but he smiled anyway. Then came the announcement that made the room erupt into applause. Sam Whitaker had been appointed to a part-time instructional role in the apprenticeship program. He would help teach core systems diagnostics and troubleshooting, drawing from both his field experience and his time working on military-grade infrastructure under Raymond's guidance. Sam looked stunned as they handed him the certificate. Raymond placed a hand on his shoulder. Well earned, he said quietly. On the drive home, Sam finally broke the silence. You think I can really teach? Raymond kept his eyes on the road. You already are. The following week, Raymond received a letter from Admiral Hale. Inside was a formal invitation to join the Navy's Civilian Consultant Corps on a part-time basis, not just for submarines, but broader infrastructure evaluation, water systems, pressure integration across multiple platforms, even exploratory design advisory. The letter ended with a handwritten note from Hale. We don't need more degrees. We need more people like you. We hope you'll consider. Raymond read it twice, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a kitchen drawer beneath the spare tractor keys and receipts for chicken feed. He wasn't sure what he would decide, but it felt good to know the door was open. Thanks to a state revitalization grant, spearheaded by none other than Representative Davis, McAllister Farm was no longer in the red. The barn had a new roof, the irrigation lines had been replaced, and there were whispers that the farm's new partnership with the local high school's trade program might become a model for other rural counties. Students would rotate through the property, learning soil management, plumbing, and repair systems firsthand. Despite all the changes swirling around him, Raymond felt no need to chase anything. Each morning still began the same: coffee, boots, and silence. The land was still here, steady underfoot, and for the first time in years, so was he. One evening, Brooke came by after work, her hair windblown and her cheeks flushed from a long day at the research lab. They're talking about using the scholarship model for environmental fieldwork too, she said, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun drop behind the trees. Hands-on learning. Applied knowledge. You started something, Dad. Raymond smiled at her. I just fixed a busted pipe. No, she said softly. You fixed the system. He said nothing in return, but he thought about it long after she drove off. About how his journey, from a reclusive farmer with scars he never spoke of to someone shaping national policy, hadn't been about chasing glory. It had been about fixing what was broken. Pipes, people, possibilities. That night, Raymond wrote in his worn leather notebook, the same one he'd kept since his Navy days. Under a new heading, next season, he made a short list. Train 2 more apprentices. Visit Portsmouth in spring, begin classroom module with Sam Stay grounded. He stared at the last line, then underlined it twice. In the quiet, as the wind rustled the fields, Raymond knew that his life would never fully return to what it once was. But in a world rushing to reward flashover function, he had shown, loudly and clearly, that integrity, patience, and craftsmanship still mattered. And he wasn't done yet. The chill of a New Hampshire morning hung over the small town of Ashfield like a soft wool blanket. The first frost of the season glittered across the fields and rooftops as Raymond pulled his old pickup truck up to the curb in front of a weathered bungalow on Maple Street. A plume of vapor drifted from the truck's exhaust as the engine idled, and Raymond sat for a moment longer, watching the sun rise behind the distant tree line. It felt good to be home. He stepped out of the cab, toolbox in hand, and walked up the porch steps. Mrs. Dunleavy, an elderly widow who'd been his father's neighbor for decades, greeted him in her signature pink housecoat. Morning, Raymond, she smiled, pulling the door wider. You came quick. Well, can't leave you without a working sink, now can I? Raymond replied, tipping his cap. You said the kitchen faucet was leaking? Started dripping 2 nights ago. Now it's a steady stream. Wasting water and driving me nuts, she said with a chuckle. Raymond stepped inside and made his way to the small kitchen, the floor creaking underfoot like an old friend. It was the kind of job he could do in his sleep, a cracked coupling, maybe a worn washer, but he took the same care as if it were submarine-grade piping. He set down his box, opened it, and began to work. A few minutes in, he noticed movement in the doorway. A boy, no more than 10, with thick glasses and a mop of dark brown hair, stood watching intently. His name was Daniel, one of the neighborhood kids who often rode his bike up and down the block. Today, though, the boy looked transfixed by Raymond's hands as they maneuvered a wrench under the sink basin. You like fixing stuff? Raymond asked without looking up. The boy nodded slowly. Is that a crescent wrench? Raymond smiled. Good eye. Most folks your age would just call it a thingy. Want to try it? Daniel's eyes widened behind his glasses. Me? Raymond sat back on his heels and extended the wrench. Go on, let's start here. The boy knelt cautiously beside him. Raymond guided Daniel's hands gently, showing him how to grip the wrench and tighten the connection. It was a small task, but the sense of purpose radiating from the boy's face lit up the room. Just like that, Raymond said. You've got good instincts. Daniel beamed. My dad says I take everything apart. He gets mad, but I just want to know how it works. Well, Raymond said, standing up and wiping his hands. The best mechanics I know started the same way. Keep asking questions. Keep turning wrenches. From the living room, Mrs. Dunleavy called out, Coffee's hot if you want a cup, Raymond. Thank you, ma'am, but I've got another stop to make, he said, smiling as he ruffled Daniel's hair. As he packed up his tools and stepped outside, Raymond's phone buzzed in his back pocket. He glanced down at the caller ID, Quentin Hale. He hesitated a second before answering. Admiral. Raymond, came Hale's steady voice, carrying a quiet gravity. We may need your help again. Raymond leaned against the truck, staring out at the horizon. The wind had picked up, rustling the amber leaves clinging to the branches. What's going on? New vessel class, different systems, some early design flaws cropping up. Thought of you when we hit a snag. It's not urgent yet, but I'd like to talk. Raymond exhaled slowly, the weight of the past few months settling over him like a warm coat. All right, you name the time. We'll be in touch, Hale said. And Raymond? Yeah? Thank you for everything. The Navy's better for having met you. Raymond hung up and climbed into his truck. Before turning the key, he sat in silence for a moment, fingers resting on the steering wheel. He looked down at the small smudge of grease on his jeans, a badge of a life lived not in boardrooms or briefing halls, but in the crawl spaces and basements of America, in mechanical rooms of nuclear submarines, in the hearts of young apprentices like Sam, and maybe now in curious kids like Daniel. He started the engine. The radio, still tuned to the local station, played faintly, news of the latest state-funded trades initiative bearing his name. But Raymond didn't dwell on that. He had a job scheduled across town, Mrs. Farrell's hot water line acting up again. He'd already promised her he'd take a look. Recognition was nice. Headlines came and went. But pipes always needed fixing. As the truck pulled away from the curb and down the street, Daniel stood on the porch with the wrench still in hand, watching. Maybe someday, Raymond thought, he'll carry his own toolbox. Maybe one day, he'll teach another wide-eyed kid how to find meaning in the smallest repairs. Because some legacies aren't built in grand speeches or government buildings. Some are built one valve at a time, one lesson at a time, one life at a time. And that, my friends, is where Raymond McAllister's story leads us, not to a dramatic explosion or a headline-grabbing finale, but to something far more powerful, a quiet revolution. A revolution of purpose, of returning dignity to work that too often gets overlooked, of reminding us all that brilliance doesn't always wear a lab coat or a business suit. Sometimes it wears flannel, carries a wrench, and keeps small towns running. Raymond didn't fix a submarine to prove he was better than anyone. He did it to remind himself, and all of us, that skill and integrity still matter. That systems, whether mechanical or societal, don't collapse from failure overnight. They erode slowly, through neglect, through arrogance, through forgetting to listen to the people who keep the pressure balanced. And when he was handed the mic, he didn't use it to boast, he used it to build. Apprenticeship funds, vocational programs, a pipeline of opportunity for kids like Sam, for towns like Ashfield, and for futures that don't come with a degree but come with grit, curiosity, and calloused hands. So what do we take from all this? Maybe it's this. Your story matters, even if it doesn't make the front page. Your skill matters, even if it doesn't come with a title. And the work you do, whether in a factory, a field, a machine room, or a classroom, might just be the thing that holds this country together. So now we want to hear from you. Have you or someone you know ever fixed something that no one else believed could be fixed? Have you learned a trade, mentored someone, or found purpose through hands-on work? Drop your story in the comments. We read everyone. And if Raymond's journey meant something to you, if it sparked a memory, changed your perspective, or made you proud of where you come from, then help us keep the momentum going. hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that their hands and their heart can still build something that lasts. Because we've got more stories just like this coming. Stories of everyday people doing extraordinary things, not for the spotlight, but because it's the right thing to do. And maybe, just maybe, the next legacy we tell will be yours. Thanks for watching. And remember, some systems break, but with the right hands, they can always be rebuilt.